So if you were a farmer, right, and your main aim as a farmer is to produce this beautiful crop, let's say it's oranges, you know, you got orange trees all through your fields, and what you're really hoping for is a really good harvest of oranges. But let's say you wake up one morning and you go out there and you see that all the orange trees, they've got holes in the leaves, that they're not really producing much fruit, and you're a bit concerned for how this is actually going to go. So if you're any good farmer, I think the first thing you probably need to do here is to try and work out what on earth is going on with your plants, to become aware of what factors are actually hindering productive growth. Now, obviously not everyone watching this is actually a farmer, but if our goal, like the farmer, is to actually have a rich and abundant life, then perhaps we also need to start becoming aware of what's getting in the way. As we described last week, one of the most common things that stops us from actually living in line with our values and doing what matters is that we become dictated to by this thing between our ears. Our mind speaks and we obey. So today we're going to be introducing a strategy called arming yourself against our thoughts. It's ARRM, standing for aware, remember, resolve, and move. Today we're just going to be talking about the aware step, being aware of our thoughts. And this actually isn't as easy as it would seem. And the reason that it's not that easy is because the reaction time between having a thought and responding in action is very, very quick, a lot quicker than it is to actually the process of starting to notice what we're actually thinking. Take for instance a moment. Imagine you're in a grocery store. Imagine you're either rushed or you're stressed, or you're just trying to get in and out as quick as possible. And as you're doing your groceries, getting everything, you just happen to notice that someone in the aisle that you're about to go down is there that you know them, and you also know that they tend to talk a lot. They tend to love to have a chat. And so before even getting a second to recognize all the thoughts you might be having in that moment, you'll probably find that you already skipped the aisle, almost as if you just went by it. You know, you'll probably just kind of go in and go out. Now, this might not be your style. You might actually want to say hello. That's not the point. The point that I'm kind of bringing up is that thoughts impact behavior so quickly that becoming aware of them is a skill that a lot of us haven't really practiced. But it's critical to do if we're actually going to want to regain control of our behavior. So how do you do it? How do you become aware of your thoughts? So today we're just going to talk about a practical way to become more aware of your thoughts. Importantly, thoughts are not often as easy to recognize as feelings. Often we can feel something, we can notice a feeling within ourselves first before we can actually discern the type of thought that was going on. Maybe you've even had a time where you can remember just feeling a bit off, but you've actually forgotten the thing that you're feeling that about until you then remember, it's about that email or that bill or that situation that's going on. So feelings are often more in our awareness than our thoughts. So we can actually use feelings and use our awareness of feelings to actually become aware of our thoughts. There are a few steps. The first step is to firstly become aware of what you're feeling. So in any situation where you find yourself acting in a way that's inconsistent with how you want to be, first I want you to notice what the feeling is there. What is the feeling? Maybe it's anxiety. A lot of the time it is. Maybe it's stress. It's feeling guilty. Maybe it's feeling rejected, hurt. Whatever the feeling is, notice the feeling. And then the second step for becoming aware is to ask yourself, why are you feeling this way? See, as soon as you ask yourself, why are you feeling a certain way, you will start to explore thoughts. Thoughts will be what come out. So if you're feeling anxious, so let's go back to the example we were talking about a couple weeks back, where you go to a party and you're expecting someone who you really know well and a good friend to be there, but they walk past without even saying hello. In that moment, if you notice what you feel, you might actually better come to what you think. For example, if you feel anxious and you ask yourself, why am I anxious? You might notice the thought, well, I'm anxious because I'm worried I've done something to upset them. Maybe you have anger, and if you're angry, maybe the thought is, who do they think they are, to be like this? They're arrogant, they think they're too good for me. Whatever it is, as you notice the feeling and you ask yourself, why do you feel that way? You're going to start to identify the thought that underlies that feeling. But we don't stop there, because that thought is just the surface level thought, and that's not what we're trying to arm ourselves against. No, we want to not arm ourselves against the arrow, but rather we want to arm ourselves against the archer behind the arrow. That's a pretty metaphoric way to say that the surface level thought is not our concern. It's the belief that underlies that thought. We can talk more about layers of thinking on another day. But for now, once you identify that thought, there is a technique called the downward arrow technique, which can kind of help you to identify the deeper beliefs that underlie your thought. For example, let's take a situation where a person has a habit of pleasing others, people pleasing, you know, in a sense, going out of their way for everyone and just as a habit, putting their own needs aside and doing what other people need. This is not a bad thing, but let's say for this person, it's starting to cause some difficult feelings. So the first thing is for that person to identify what they feel, to actually sit down and recognize, what am I feeling about this? And maybe they might pick up that they feel sad, they feel neglected, they feel unwanted. And in those feelings, to then ask the next question is, why do I feel this way? And maybe they then might uncover the thought, I'm doing so much for others, but they are not reciprocating what I'm doing for them. And so now you have a particular thought. Let's call this the surface level thought. You know, I'm doing a lot for others, they're not doing it back for me. But now using the downward arrow technique, we can ask ourselves some questions about this thought. For example, we can ask ourselves, okay, if that's happening, what's so bad about that? If I'm doing more for others than they're doing for me, what does that say? Well, it might say that people don't care about me. Let's dig deeper. If people don't care about me, what is that saying? Well, that I don't really matter. And if I don't matter, what's that saying? Well, maybe that I have no worth, I have no value. So what we kind of see is now we've identified the deeper belief that we want to become aware of. Now we can use the rest of the ARRMing strategy to target that particular belief, because thoughts are very much like icebergs. A lot of the time we're only conscious of what's at the top, while there are these deeper, more well-ingrained beliefs that underlie, and that's what we need to become more aware of. So throughout this week, as you go through your week and do your things, take a moment just to start by becoming more aware of what you're feeling, even before you become more aware of your thinking. Start if you can find time to put aside just to close your eyes, to sit down and to reflect on, what am I actually feeling today? And then from there to move to asking yourself, what are you thinking? In other words, to say, why am I feeling this way? And you'll get to your thought. And as you have that thought, starting to dig deeper, it's a bit of a tricky process, but through some of the examples I mentioned earlier, try and find what is the real underlying belief that's driving this thought, which is driving your feeling, which is driving your action, which is ruining your crop of living an abundant life. So ultimately, I'll leave this with you. We'll continue next week talking about the second step, which is to remember. These videos are just to give you a little bit of insight to some of the work we're doing at the Harvest Clinic, where we really value doing work at the roots in order to create change at the fruit, rather than helping people simply feel better and move on. I hope that this is helpful, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks.